Hello everyone. So when we talk about ICD 9 to ICD 10 conversion, there are a few things that we need to have some basic understanding of. First of all, when you migrate from one scenario to another scenario, what are your basic expectations? You don't want your business to change drastically because if it does, it's going to cause havoc amongst your customers and your doctors and you as well. So if you are an insurance company, one thing that you will be looking for while migrating from ICD 9 to ICD 10 conversion is financial neutrality. So let's try and understand what financial neutrality is. Before we understand financial neutrality, there is a basic concept called diagnosis related group, which we need to understand. So diagnosis related group, or in other words, also known as DRGs, are groups of ICD codes or treatment related codes. What that means is, let's say there are four different types of ICD DRG groups. There is group A, there is group B, there is group C, and then there is group D. And we have several ICD codes that we are trying to group them into different DRGs. So let's say there is ICD code 1, ICD code 2, ICD code 3. We group them into DRG A. Then there is ICD code 4 and 5. Let's group them into DRG B. And then there is 6, 7, 8, and 9. Let's group these ICD codes into DRG C. Now, what is the basis for this grouping? On what basis are we trying to group these ICD codes into respective DRGs? Well, these groups are formed based on the types of services and types of products that hospitals provide to their patients. And each DRG has a certain weight associated with it. So there are some DRGs with higher weight. There are other DRGs which are with lower weight. And by weight, what you mean is every DRG has a base dollar amount associated with them. Now let's take an example. If you have DRG A, which has a dollar amount associated with it, say $5,000. What that means is any ICD code, any claim that has ICD code 1, 2, or 3 will automatically get classified into DRG A. And what that means for our business is if our insurance company receives any claim containing any one of these three ICD codes, we'll automatically know what is the base dollar amount that needs to be paid to doctor for this particular claim. Similarly, there is another DRG group, let's say DRG B, which has 4 and 5 ICD codes, and the dollar amount associated with this one is say $1,000. And what that tells you is if you receive a claim which has either of these two ICD codes, 4 or 5, your insurance company will group this code into DRG B, and it will automatically know that the base dollar amount for this claim is $1,000. Now, this is a basic concept behind diagnosis related group. Now, let's try and understand a real life scenario and why would a financial neutrality be affected when we move from ICD 9 to ICD 10 volt. So let's say a patient goes to a doctor, receives some kind of treatment related to some cranial procedure. Now this doctor, after giving a treatment to this patient, submits a claim in ICD 9 code format. We haven't yet moved from ICD 9 to ICD 10, let's assume. So this doctor submits a claim in ICD 9 code format. Let's say he submits a claim with ICD-9 code 38.12, which is related to cranial procedure. Now this code is grouped into DRG 039. That's a real group which this claim is grouped into. And based on this grouping, insurance company and the hospital know how much is the base payment for this particular treatment. They are not interested in what code it is, they are interested in what DRG it is. And based on that DRG, they decide how much is the base payment that is going to be made for this particular claim. Now let's move on to ICD-10 version. Now we have ICD-10 codes coming in. Same thing happens, doctor provides a treatment to the patient, and instead of submitting a claim in ICD-9 format, this time doctor submits a claim in ICD-10 format. So doctor puts an ICD-10 equivalent of the cranial procedure related claim code and submits this claim to insurance company. Now insurance company takes this ICD-10 code and groups it into DRG again. But this time, since it's a different code, it gets grouped into DRG 027. It doesn't get grouped into DRG 039. And because of this different grouping, what happens is insurance company ends up paying more to a provider because DRG 027 has a higher weight than DRG 039. So if you understand this scenario from a business standpoint, doctor basically has provided the same treatment, patient has the same diagnosis, but doctor used to get, say, $1,000 in ICD-9 world. For the same treatment, doctor received $5,000 in ICD-10 world. So in this case, we lost our financial neutrality. So how to maintain financial neutrality in this case? So in order to maintain financial neutrality, we have to maintain our old DRG. We don't want to move to new DRG, which is DRG 027, but instead, for the same procedure, what we want is DRG 039. If we can maintain the old DRG, we can maintain our financial neutrality. So how would we do that? In order to achieve this, we need to get rid of mapping or grouping of ICD-10 code into DRG. Because if we group that, it's going to be grouped into DRG 027, which is something that we don't want. We want to group it into DRG 039. And how are we going to go about it? So let's first get rid of this grouping of ICD-10 code. Now instead of grouping this ICD-10 code into DRG, what we'll do is we'll map this ICD-10 code back to ICD-9, and we'll find out what this code would have meant in ICD-9 world. This is what we call a backward mapping. And once we map this code into ICD-9, we'll group this ICD-9 code into DRG, and then it will give us the same DRG that we would have got in ICD-9 world, and thus we will maintain our financial neutrality. So for the same treatment, which doctor received, say, $1,000 for example, in the past, doctor will continue receiving the same amount even in ICD-10 world. And this way, insurance company won't end up paying more or less. Even doctor won't end up getting less or more payment from insurance company. Everything will be maintained as it is. And that's basically the whole concept behind financial neutrality and the backward mapping.